Right. Welcome back to the tactics room. And if you sat through this quarterfinal expecting Spain to blow Belgium away, you probably spent about 80 minutes feeling a bit uneasy because for long stretches, this looked like one of those nights where the better side dominates the ball, controls the rhythm, and still can't quite find the punchline. Spain had the territory, they had the position up around the two-thirds mark. They had Belgium pinned into a mid-block for large parts of the game, and yet the tie was hanging on a knife edge going into the closing minutes at one piece. And then Mikel Merino did the exact same thing he did against Portugal in the round of 16. He came off the bench, he gambled on a rebound, and he settled it. Two touches, one goal, and Spain are into a World Cup semi-final against France with their unbeaten run stretched out to 36 games. So, in this episode, I want to talk through how the game was actually built because the scoreline tells you it was tight, but the underlying structure tells you a slightly different story. And the truth sits somewhere in between. Let's start with the team sheets because there were a couple of decisions here that shaped everything that followed. De La Fuente made one significant change in the Spain side, bringing in Fabián Ruiz in place of Pedri. And that's not a like-for-like swap at all. Pedri gives you that lovely close control circulation in tight areas, whereas Fabian is a longer striding, more vertical presence who arrives in the box. And you will notice that decision paid off almost immediately when he turned up on the end of a rebound for the opener. Spain lined up in their usual 4-3-3 with Zubimendi anchoring, Yamal and Nico Williams stretching the pitch on either flank, and Oyarzabal leading the line with Dani Olmo floating between the lines. Belgium had a much rougher build-up to kick off. They lost their captain Youri Tielemans in the warm-up, which is a real blow because he had been central to everything they had done in the knockout rounds, and that forced a reshuffle in a double pivot that suddenly looked a lot less secure without him. They set up in a 4-2-3-1 with De Bruyne pulling the strings of the front, Doku isolated wide to run at the fullback, and Lukaku holding it up through the middle. The shape was designed to sit a little deeper, absorb Spain's position, and hit them on the counter through Doku's carrying and De Bruyne's service. And for a while, the plan actually looked like it might hold up. Spain went looking for the right half space and they tried to break Belgium down was pretty clear from early on. It all weighed towards their right. Yamal kept drifting inside of the touchline to occupy the half space, and every time he did that, he dragged Belgium's left back into an awkward decision. Because if he follows Yamal inside, then Pedro Porro is teaming up on the outside on the overlap. And if he stays wide, then Yamal has the ball on the half turn in the pocket, which is the last thing you want to allow. That little combination on the right was the engine of Spain's attack all night, and Belgium never really found a clean way to shut both options down at once. On the far side, you had Nico Williams holding the width and pinning Belgium's right back, which meant Spain could load up numbers on the right and still know that a quick switch would give them a 1 versus 1 on the opposite flank. The whole thing was built around getting to the byline and cutting it back into the space around the penalty spot. And that's exactly where the first goal came from. So it wasn't a fluke as much as it was the natural product of the pattern they kept rehearsing. Opener arrived just after that first half hydration break, and it came straight down the channel we have just been talking about. Yamal slid Porro in behind the right. Porro dug out the cross towards Dani Olmo. And Olmo's shot was parried by Courtois, but only as far as Fabián Ruiz, who had timed his arrival into the box perfectly and had the simplest of finishes to turn it home. This is the goal that justifies the selection call because that is precisely the run Fabián gives you that Pedri doesn't. The late unseen arrival at the back post area when the balls work to the byline. If you're being critical of Belgium here, and you probably should be, nobody tracks the runner. They're so focused on the ball and the first shot that the second phase catches them completely flat and against a side that circulates it as patiently as Spain do. You simply cannot switch off when the initial effort gets blocked or saved. It is a soft one to give up, and it put Belgium in exactly the game they did not want, chasing it against a team that is very happy to keep the ball off you for 10 minutes at a time. Belgium's response, though, was a really good one, and it came from the sort of moment that had been Spain's calling card all tournament. Timothy Castagne got himself into the space on the right and whipped in a genuinely lovely cross, the kind that's driven in flat and fast towards the near post, and Charles de Ketelaere read the flight of it early and got across his marker to steer a glancing header past Unai Simon. It's a smart, well-timed near-post run, and it exposed the one area where Spain can occasionally be got at, which is defending crosses when their fullbacks are pushed high and the far centre back is being occupied. And there's a real weight to this goal beyond the scoreline because it was the first goal Spain had considered all summer. They had gone 650 minutes without letting one in at this World Cup, a clean sheet run that stretched all the way back to Qatar. So the streak going down like that was a genuine jolt. And for a few minutes, either side of the halftime, you could feel Belgium believing they could actually go and win this thing. The second half was where this became a proper contest because Belgium started to trust their transition a bit more and stopped just defending for their lives. There was a spell where De Bruyne dropped into the pockets between Spain's midfield and defense and started feeding Doku into those one versus one situations against Cucurella. And once or twice they combined with some really clever interplay and almost carved out a lead. That is the danger with Belgium. You can dominate them for an hour, but they've got the individual quality in the final third to punish you in the single sequence. And for about 15 or 20 minutes, there they looked, the more likely of the two to score next. But then the game turned on an injury, and this is the bit that ends up being decisive. Courtois went down after being slow to get up following a clearance around the 71st minute. He took some treatment, looked like he might carry on, and then had to come off, which brought Lamans on in goal. Now, that is a huge downgrade in that specific moment, not because Lamans is a poor keeper, but because you're throwing a backup into a knockout cauldron cold, and the handling under pressure is exactly the thing that suffers when you have been sat on the bench. Spain did not necessarily change their approach after that, but they did start testing him from distance. And that decision to just have a go at the new man is what eventually broke the game open. If you map the flow of the game out across the 90 minutes, it's a story in three acts. The first half hour is nearly all Spain. They're camped in Belgium's half and opener feels like it's coming. And then the equalizer flips the emotional momentum and hands Belgium a genuine foothold right before the break. The hour mark through to about 70 is Belgium's window. The De Bruyne and Doku spell, the period where a neutral would have said this could go either way. And then the final stretch swings back to Spain, partly because of the keeper chain and partly because that's just what Spain do to you. They keep coming, they keep the ball, and they wait for the fatigue and the mistakes to show up. What the momentum picture really underlines is that this was never a thrashing, whatever possession numbers might suggest. Spain were the better and more controlled side, but they didn't overwhelm Belgium, and they needed a specific individual moment and a lapse of it. And that was, we can say, a goalkeeping misfortune to get over the line. That's a useful thing to bank going into a semi-final because France will not be as generous. So to the winner, and honestly, you could have scripted it. Merino came on in the 86th minute, and within a couple of minutes, Pau Cubarsí, of all people, stepped out from the back and drove a shot in from distance. Lamans got down to it but couldn't hold it and spilled it back into the danger area. Merino had gambled on exactly that and following the shot in, turning the rebound up into the roof of the net on his second touch of the entire match. It is the identical script to the Portugal game where he also came off the bench to settle it late. And at some point, you stop calling it a coincidence and start calling it a habit. There's a real coaching lesson buried in here too. because that is the value of a squad that carries goal threat all the way down the bench. De La Fuente can throw on a midfielder who attacks the box like a striker, and against a tiring defense with a nervous stand-in keeper, that's a matchup you'll take every single time. Belgium, by contrast, had lost their captain before kickoff and their number one during the game, and eventually those margins caught up with them. So, where does that leave us? In the tactical verdict, Spain are through. The unbeaten run rolls on to 36, and they've got the composure and the squad depth that wins you tournaments. But if I'm De La Fuente, I'm not pretending this was a vintage performance. They controlled the ball without ever truly cleaning the game off. They conceded for the first time all summer from a fairly avoidable near post cross, and they needed a goalkeeping error from a stand in goalkeeper to separate the sides. Those are exactly the details that a France front line will pounce on if they are repeated on Tuesday. For Belgium, there's genuine pride in this one, even in defeat, because they lost their captain before a ball was kicked, lost their goalkeeper in the second half, and still took one of the tournament favorites to the 88th minute. The nagging feeling is that they defended the two-faced moment poorly for the first goal and never quite trusted themselves to commit more bodies forward during their good spell. And against a side as ruthless in the small margins as Spain, that hesitation is what sends you home. On to the semi-finals then, Spain against France, and on this evidence, Spain will need to be a good deal sharper in the final third to get through it. If you liked this episode, do share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and hype up this video. That's it from the Tactics Room. I'll see you for the next one.